Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. As the graphic details and sensational headlines continue to unfold in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, there are concerns the testimony could be triggering for some survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Experts say hearing those stories can evoke powerful emotions from pain to fear to anger, even feelings of helplessness. Well, tonight we're talking to advocates who are dedicated to supporting survivors, and they will shed light on resources, discuss the importance of trauma-informed care, and offer guidance to those who need to learn how to cope. My guests are Dr. Denise McCain, Director of the Prince George's County Family Justice Center, and Dr. Indira Hennard, President and CEO of the DC Rape Crisis Center. Ladies, thank you so much for taking the time to have this really important conversation with us.
Thank you, Harold, for having us.
Sure. I want to share just a couple of fast facts with you about the issues that are kind of coming up as a result of this trial. The National Intimate Partner in Sexual Violence Survey reports nearly 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men in the U.S. have been raped at some point in their lives. And according to the Justice Department, less than 20% of sexual assaults are reported to police, with many survivors feeling afraid, ashamed, or fear they will not be believed. And the National Domestic Violence Hotline indicates that survivors may experience anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder at significantly higher rates than the general population. And these are just a handful of the facts that come out as it relates to this issue. But I want to talk to you about the things that have kind of come out of this trial. And there have been photographs, there have been videos, there's been testimony. I'll start with you, Denise. How do you believe that this trial can be triggering for survivors of domestic violence? And how might that triggering manifest itself?
Well, Harold, as you pointed out, we have been exposed to quite a bit around this trial, the circumstances, all the details. And for victims of abuse, it can be re-victimizing. Things as simple as watching someone being abused, as we've all seen with Cassie, hearing things, even in some instances, there are smells, things that trigger a person, that takes them back to their experience. And it can be very difficult for them to cope with the situation. And it is very much a trauma effect that victims who've been through this, they clearly and very frequently identify. And it does lead to many of the other symptoms that you just pointed out, such as, reliving it causes them to feel the way they did before, the depression, anxiety, fear, post-traumatic stress disorder. These are all things that are associated with triggers that happen very frequently when individuals have to witness and relive abuse, something that they've been through.
Yeah. And Dira, we've heard reporting of rape, sexual assault, etc., in this trial that's only a week old as of today. But I have the same question, because some survivors, they may want to turn off the news, but this is everywhere.
I think this is such a high-profile trial, Harold, and we have heard some egregious testimony, and May is also Mental Health Awareness Month, and Dr. McCain hit it on the nail. Survivors are being retriggered. There is no question about that. Even folks who may not identify as survivors are being triggered. And so we are really encouraging folks to, as much as possible, minimize your intake on social media, minimize your intake on the media as a whole, and really reach out and get support. We know that when survivors hear other survivors tell their story, yes, they can be re-triggered and they are being re-triggered. But the other side to that is that we know that healing can happen. And we know that by listening to someone else's story, that can also give you strength and courage to share what has happened with you.
Hmm. Denise, as Indira just said, you can try to limit your exposure, but whether it's in the news, whether it's social media, but people are talking about it. And how do you address this if you are a survivor when it literally is on the lips of just about anybody that you encounter who may not know whether or not you are a survivor?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what I was thinking as you were asking the question. Of really, it depends on the person. It depends on how public, how well known their particular situation was, and if it does cause that type of reaction, or you're feeling, re-victimized, reliving it. It's the best thing to do is to just say, "Hey, this is something that I'm really uncomfortable with. I would prefer not to take part in this discussion. If you wouldn't mind, if you could just limit it to things that don't involve this case, because it is very traumatic and upsetting for me. If you're not in a position where you're able to disclose or talk about your own experience, you may then just have to remove yourself. But certainly, I would not encourage anyone to remain in a space, in a situation where this is causing them that level of distress and discomfort."
Indira, you're
Mhm.
nodding your head.
Yeah, that's, absolutely right. I think, survivors don't owe anyone their story. We know that, 1 in 4 women are sexually violated. It's always safe to say that if there's more than 4 people in the room, that there are survivors amongst your midst. And so I think, this is where community care really comes into play, that if you are talking about a situation that can be as triggering as this, Dr. McCain said it best, always asking to see or just removing yourself from the situation. But we cannot underestimate the power and the intensity of the graphic details that are coming out. We have not seen details on this level in quite some time. And I think we were only in the second week, right? And there's more testimony to come. And so I think we have to understand that sexual assault is not a single issue, because we don't live single issue lives, and it intersects with absolutely every walk of life. And so we really have to be mindful about how we are engaging in these conversations in the workplace, in our faith-based communities, just out in general, just as we move through the world.
Well, you make such an important point, Indira, because I'm thinking, even as the three of us are talking about this, we have to talk about this because this is the work that you two do in your capacity to support survivors. This is the work that I do
Mhm.
as a news presenter. And yet, in having this conversation, I even am worried and or concerned about those who may be listening and may be bothered by this conversation, even though all of us right here, right now, are
Mhm.
trying to help.
Yeah, I mean, I think, part of what happens with sexual assault and domestic violence is that historically the conversations have happened in silence. And so
Mm,
part of what we need to do is begin to pierce that veil and break the silence. I am disappointed that I'm not seeing more, not hearing more people have these conversations. There are multiple implications at place because, as I mentioned, sexual assault is a intersectional issue. This has a profound impact within the Black community. And I do think that we have to begin to have these conversations. I think part of the uncomfortability is that people don't understand how something like this could happen.
Mhm.
People don't understand what consent is and what consent is not, and how even if you consent to A, B, C, and D, it's okay to say no to, E, F, G, and what have you. And I think that's part of the challenge. And so we are really hearing a lot of feedback, particularly in the media and on social media, but it's not the feedback and the conversations that you would hope because we're seeing a lot of victim blaming. But that is
Yeah.
because there is not education around sexual violence, and there has not been an intentional conversation, I think, particularly within the Black community around these issues.
I
Yeah.
don't want to lose that point because I think that really goes to the heart of not only the conversation that I'm having with you two, but the conversation that's coming out of the trial, the
Mhm.
testimony that is coming out of the trial, and those who, on one hand, may not believe, on the other hand, may not understand, and the difference between that. And I'm going to drill down a little bit more about that because that's such a critical point. But I do want you to both share some resources if you can. And I'll start with you, Denise, for those who are listening, men and women, both, who may be having uh, uncomfortable feelings, maybe triggered, however you'd like to describe it. Where can they go for resources for support? And I'll start with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're here. We are the Prince George's County Family Justice Center. We are that one-stop shop resource that provides an array of services from shelter to counseling to even social supportive services that an individual would need, particularly if they're seeking to flee an abusive situation. Our number is 301 780 8008, or we can be found on the website at pgcfamilyjusticecenter.com. We are here Monday through Friday. Also, I should mention on Saturdays, we're here from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. because we also understand that this is not a 9 to 5 issue and resources are needed around the clock. So those are things. There are also national websites that are available. The National Domestic Violence Center hotline are both available to get information and support. So please, I would encourage everyone to reach out, anyone that needs that help to get it.
Indira, your resources that you'd like to share, please.
Yes, we are the DC Rape Crisis Center, and we are the oldest rape crisis center in the country. Our services are 24/7. If folks are needing support, whether it's individual counseling, group counseling, or other support systems, we encourage you to call our 24/7 hotline, which is 202-333-RAPE.
One more time, please. For that.
202
Mhm.
333-RAPE.
Denise, your phone number again, please, real quick.
301 780 8008.
Thank you so very much. I need to take a break, but don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM, channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our difficult but very important conversation about domestic violence and sexual assault, the triggers that are coming out of the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial in New York. My guests are Dr. Indira Hennard, President and CEO of the DC Rape Crisis Center, and Dr. Denise McCain, Director of the Prince George's County Family Justice Center. I want to go back and really address the issue that Indira brought up, and it is such an important thing, because for those who were watching the coverage, Cassie Ventura, the longtime ex-girlfriend of Sean Combs, was saying that there were occasions when at least one occasion where he had raped her. We saw the video of the domestic violence, but I want to just talk about the sexual assault piece first, because one of the things that the defense brought out, Indira, was that there were text messages where she said that she loved him, speaking to him, and that she would do anything to make him happy. And that goes to the example that you were talking about before the break, where you can agree to A, B, C, and D, but say no to E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So, but for people who are on the outside of that situation, who've not experienced sexual assault, who may not have any kind of experience with talking to someone, they may not understand how that works. Talk to me about that, please.
So that's such a great question, and thank you for asking it. So what I want people to understand is that Cassie was groomed. Cassie was 19 years old when her initial interaction with Sean Diddy Combs started. And at 19 years old, what neurobiology of trauma teaches us is that your frontal lobe is not even fully developed until you're 26 or 27. Cassie was groomed. Cassie was groomed with the promise of a high profile career, a better life, access, et cetera, et cetera. What we are dealing with here is a man who was extremely powerful, and he was within an ecosystem that was helping to facilitate this abuse. And so you can consent to some things and not consent to other things. And I think, people need to realize that when you consent to something, that doesn't mean it's an automatic consent for the duration, right? Consent can be taken back at any time, but people need to understand that Cassie was groomed. And if you really look at the text messages, the grooming started within the text messages, right? It is, there is evidence within those messages of how, those small conversations were leading to the big conversations. There was intentional language in there in terms of trying to get consent and things like that. But people also have to understand that she was almost a child, right? 19 years old. Think about where you were at 19. Think about your thought process at 19. And no matter if she consented, what happened to her does not even align with what we know to be true as it goes to consent. Because on a lot of those situations, she was not herself. She admitted to taking drugs and other pills and things of that nature in order to disassociate and numb out. So when you are inebriated, whether it's with medication or drugs or alcohol, you technically can't consent.
Right. I would also add to that, which is an excellent point, and thank you for bringing that out. There's also the element of trauma bonding. She was with this man for 10, 11 years. The nature of that relationship, as was just explained, there was an unequal power imbalance there of power. And, the natural instincts that you have when you're in situations such as that, we all know about them, the fight, flight, freeze response. In her case, it was also the befriending response, whereby she took on certain behaviors. She did things and largely to survive, I would say, whether it was going along with these parties, agreeing to have sex against her own real desire to do so. These are some of the elements that happen because they're led to believe when you're in that state that you can, you justify the behavior because of the relationship that you have with the abuser. They cover for their abusers, which we've also seen. They tolerate the abuse even because they're unable to leave those relationships, or they just don't know, even though they know, I should say, that they should. They're just unable to. In fact, I've even heard her say that she didn't have the agency or the strength to move beyond the situation that she was in. And a lot of that is because of the grooming and because of the experiences that she had, and also that unhealthy, unnatural bonding that resulted from the trauma that she was exposed to.
Well, I think, no, go ahead, Indira, go ahead.
Sorry, just one other point I just want to piggyback off of. Cassie did try to get away a couple times. She did try to get away, and there's videos of that, right? And she was not allowed to get away, right? So let's also put that out there. The last thing I'll say is that there was an element of financial abuse because Sean Diddy Combs' team was managing, checking her money, all of those things. So there was an element of financial abuse to this. And so again, the small things were leading to the big things as well.
And that is the thing that I was about to mention, because in these conversations that we have had, and Denise and I in particular, we have spoken about this issue for years and years about the yeah the financial imbalance. But I would argue that very rarely have we seen this kind of obvious financial imbalance when we've had these discussions. It's one thing when we're talking about, just regular working people where, yes, you may have a married couple or a couple that's living together, and one may be the breadwinner, but the other may be making some money. And just talking about the money as a whole, they are tied to each other because one may not be able to financially survive without the other. That's one thing. But when you're talking, and I'm just talking about the money, not the emotional stuff, but when you're talking about one person who is a multi almost billionaire with a B, and someone who comparatively has nothing, has absolutely nothing, and as you said, Indira, had to survive. You're here because you must survive, because you may think, well, where am I going to eat, where am I going to sleep, where if I leave. And one of the other things that we've mentioned in this conversation is Dawn Richard, who is part of the group Danity Kane. She testified today that, and this is the power dynamic, where she saw the physical abuse that Sean Combs perpetrated on Cassie Ventura. And she said on the stand today she did not speak up because of the power dynamic. She did not know what speaking up would mean for her. And so all of the things that we've discussed, the domestic violence, and how those relationships happen, are really brought out in very, very clear terms, Denise.
Absolutely. And again, I mean, that is one of the primary reasons why victims stay in these situations. They're unable to leave because of that power imbalance, particularly for a person such as Cassie, who, first and foremost, as we understood, came into this relationship because of a promise for a career. She had some success in that regard. She knew and saw the power the influence that this man had. And I'm sure those were some of the tactics that were used to keep her in place, to control her, the threats of what would happen if she did not continue to cooperate or if she attempted to leave, beyond her own fear of the unknown, because that's another problem. You know, as you pointed out, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? How am I going to take care of myself? There's also that piece of it, that she was concerned about her future, her career. And unfortunately, those things were more important, or again, she didn't have enough wherewithal, the self-esteem, the confidence to believe in herself and her ability to still succeed without him. And then I would also add, perhaps not even able to do so because of his power, being blacklisted, so that she would not have been able to get jobs and to move forward with her career. So that is real. It's, you know, I can share with you here, you know, the overwhelming majority of the people that we see in this agency have little to no income. And for that reason, they feel trapped in these relationships. They have nowhere to go. They don't have the skill set to take care of themselves. So inevitably they stay. They stay because they know that they know what they know. The abuse they feel they can live with. They've been there, they've done that. I can handle this, but at least I know I have a roof over my head. I know that my children will be fed. I know that I'm going to be taken care of. So I'd rather stay in this situation than to leave. Of course, that's not healthy. We certainly don't promote that, but it's a reality for people. You know, what are they going to do and where they're going to go? So the financial component, the financial control is very real, and it certainly was on display with this situation.
Indira, have you had a chance? I know it's only been a week, but have you had an opportunity to speak with the survivors that you serve or the staff that serves those survivors about this trial? And if so, what have you been hearing?
Yeah, so what we've been hearing is we have had callers call our 24/7 hotline. We had an increase in calls last week. We've had the Sean Diddy Combs trial come up in individual group sessions, in individual sessions as well as group therapy sessions. This is extremely triggering for survivors. And part of the reason that it's so triggering, putting aside the graphic details, which is this, same old song that Black women are not believed, right? And it's important to understand that Sean Diddy Combs was able to commit what he did, understanding his high profile status. He did not do it alone. And so he was enabled, right? This was a ecosystem of rape culture that was around him. People who he paid off, security guards, people who went to get supplies, people who witnessed the abuse, people who knew what was happening and did not do anything and protected him. And so when you talk about power, power is not just individual power as it relates to this situation, but it's also the collective power within his inner circle that helped to perpetuate the abuse against Cassie.
What about the survivors that you are serving, Denise? Have you had any conversations with them or the staff around these issues?
Our staff, we have weekly Stay in Touch. It's a support group of survivors, and the therapist who facilitates that group has had a lot of conversation with our clients about their concerns. This has certainly been a topic of discussion. For some, it has been retriggering. But for the most part, we aren't seeing necessarily increase in people coming in for services. But what we are seeing is that those that are coming with more serious cases, which to me means that they're recognizing, and perhaps this case has been what prompted them. They're recognizing the need to get help. And I do want to add to the comment that Dr. Hennard said earlier about this whole thing being so visible and so much a part of our culture right now. I do see the benefit, and even Cassie has said this, of this being a very empowering process for individuals that have gone through it, for her perhaps healing. But I do think we need to have a better understanding as a society of what this actually looks like. It's not what people think it is. I've had people that have said, well, why would you stay? If someone is doing that to you, you just leave. But again, it's not always so straightforward. It's not a black and white situation. And more importantly, they never start out as being abusive and violent. They can start out as very normal, healthy, loving relationships until they are no longer that. They become toxic, they become unhealthy and even violent, which is what we've seen here. So I think it's important. The situation, I think, is serving a larger purpose, not just to sensationalize the situation, but to help people understand what this really looks like and how an individual could become a victim of, if not domestic violence, sexual violence, because it does happen every day. It's real.
One of the things about this being everywhere, and it's kind of come up, I think for me, I was talking to a dear sister friend over the weekend, and she said to me that she thought that there was more coverage of this than there was of the Harvey Weinstein movie mogul information. And I disagreed. And I said, from my perspective as a news person, equal amounts of coverage. I said, but the difference is that Harvey Weinstein was not black.
Mm-hmm.
And most of his victims, I think with the exception of one, were all white women.
Mm-hmm.
And for black people, because we know Sean Diddy Combs, we saw him with Cassie Ventura. If not that, we know J-Lo and his relationship with so he was part of black pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think, Indira? Do you think this was about not so much which had more coverage, but about what black people were paying attention to?
Absolutely, because we saw something similar with Bill Cosby.
Mm-hmm. And it's also something, as you pointed out, that we're closer to. We have a better sense of affinity with who he is. We know him, and we perhaps even identify somewhat, to some extent, just as Black women, with Cassie. So certainly, that is one of the reasons why I do feel that there is probably that element within our community. It's something that we're just closer to. We see it, we understand it. It's not as far removed as the Harvey Weinstein case was.
Yeah. Denise, this is a really important question in a whole bouquet of important questions. Dawn Richard was testifying today that she encouraged Cassie Ventura to leave. But as we saw in the video, and who knows how many times she may have tried to leave, that we can't see because there is no video of her attempting to escape.
Mm-hmm.
How should a person leave? How do you do that? If you have, assuming that you have a financial foundation to take care of yourself, I'm talking about the actual logistics, because in this case, Sean Diddy Combs was everywhere. He had power. He had people looking out for him.
Yeah, and that's a very important question, because as we know, that is the most dangerous time for a victim when they are attempting to flee, to leave an abusive relationship. So my statement would be to be very strategic in doing so. It's not something that you would just out of the clear blue decide, I'm done, I'm leaving. It would really require a plan, which is one of the things that we do with every person that comes in this door, whether they're ready to leave an abusive relationship or not. We develop a safety plan with them, an individualized safety plan, because it can be very dangerous. Yes, we did see that, at least I saw one where he certainly pulled her back and as was pointed out, there were other attempts, but you have to be strategic. Abusers look at their victims as their possession, their property, and the thought of them leaving, if you think of something that you own, that you have, that's going to be taken away from you, you're going to do everything in your power to hold on to it, which is sort of the mindset of an abuser. So you have to be strategic. You have to plan. You have to have, your bag, your keys. You have to let trusted friends, family members know. And again, at a time when it's not suspected that that's what you're doing. Even in her case, as you pointed out, there were people that were watching her all the time. She did have opportunities, I would imagine, to go to her mother's house or to go to the store or to do something. Had this been a prearranged strategy on her part, she would have perhaps taken some things there or given documents to those individuals prior to actually physically leaving, so that her exit and departure would not look like I'm carrying a bag, I have everything in my hand, because it's obvious that I'm walking out the door. No, I'm going where I would normally go, where you have allowed me to go without supervision, or perhaps with, but still, again, knowing that the strategy is that I'm doing this very covertly, that you're not aware of the fact that this is something, because it can be extremely dangerous, the most dangerous time for a victim.
And Deborah, what is trauma-informed care?
So, trauma informed care, what we like to say, it's from the front door to the back door. Trauma informed care is really being intentional around, if you are serving victims of abuse, that you understand what their needs are, from the counseling to the space to how you are engaging with them. We at the DC Rape Crisis Center, we have extensive training, with all of our staff around making sure that they are trauma informed, making sure that we as an organization are trauma informed. Prime example, we know that smells can be very triggering. We know taste can be very triggering. So we are mindful of that. We know lighting and colors can be very triggering. So we're very, very intentional. Prime example, we did renovations on the building that we owned, and we had conversations with our survivors in advance to let them know that when they come in, that they may smell some things differently, that the space may be set up differently. We were really intentional about that. What are they needing? Asking the question, what are you needing to feel safe in this environment? How can we support you? Those things are really important, because you are engaging in a relationship with a survivor, and you're joining them on their healing journey, and understanding how trauma looks different for different people. Trauma means something different to different people. And so really engaging in questions and asking what people are needing and how you can support them. Those are one of the best ways to be trauma informed, because you can't make assumptions, because you don't know that, this type of trauma may be really upsetting to someone, and someone else may have a different version of what is traumatic to them. And so you really have to be intentional with that.
Well, I was about to say, because you can renovate a building, you can paint a wall for the people that you are presently serving, but tomorrow someone else may come in who may be triggered by the wall and everything else. How can you be everything to everyone when each trauma is so individualized?
Right. And so we can't, but what we can do is have intentional conversations with our survivors, and we can ask them what their needs are, or what may be coming up for them. I think part of one of the biggest things that we do is that we engage and
So those are very important elements to being trauma informed. And here at the Family Justice Center, in addition to training, all of our staff have been certified in trauma informed care. It's important to hear from the victim, the survivor, understand what's important to them. And I believe Dr. Hernard was alluding to that we do want to make sure that we are not making any decisions for them. And that's really what we do. We give them agency, particularly when you think of people who've had the control taken away from them. We don't make decisions for them. We also understand that a way a person responds or reacts may not be what you would expect. Even though you're in a position where you're trying to help them, they may snap at you, or they may be aggressive, or, react in a way that doesn't seem to fit the situation. It's a level of understanding that this is a person's way of dealing with trauma. They've been victimized, and you just happen to be the person that they're now speaking out to, and you're getting the brunt of it. But by no means are you to internalize that or to take it personally. I do like the front door to the back door concept. We also model that here. As you know, we're a part of a governmental institution, so we have security here. This is the most secure building in the county. And one of the things, if I had been here when this building was being put together, I would not have had uniformed officers as the first person that you greet when you walk into the Family Justice Center.
Why not?
Because it can be very triggering for a person. Some people don't feel safe, particularly within our community. If we're talking about individuals who are non-documented, that could be something that immediately causes them to panic. They don't want to have any interaction with law enforcement. So again, we have to work around that. We try to create an environment that's welcoming. And I will also add to have people here that look like the population that we serve, which is something that I have found doing work around the country. It's not the norm. Most of the individuals that come in here are women of color, but the staff don't look like them. And that can also be a barrier and very challenging.
That's an interesting thing, because as you know, I've been to the center, and as you said, different people see things different ways. Because from my perspective, when I saw the sheriff's deputy, my thing is that any perpetrator of domestic violence against a victim realizes this is a place that you do not come to find your partner if you believe that they are there, for example. But you gave me a different perspective. So what would you have done? Would that deputy have still been there but out of sight? Because I mean, this is
I think it's extremely important to have a level of security, and the running joke here is that this is the safest building in the court complex. From bulletproof glass, we have cameras all around, we have panic buttons throughout, so we are very, very cognizant and recognize the need for safety. What I would have done, I would have moved it over to the side, so that when a person came in, they would have been greeted by an individual who would have directed them to go through security, but not as soon as you walk in the door. As you know, that's the first place you stop, is with the deputy sheriff, and you're going through security. It is necessary, but it could have been done in a way that was more client-centered, if you will, that did take into account that this may be very off-putting or perhaps intimidating for someone.
Yeah, different people see things different ways, definitely.
But to your point, Harold, I will add that we did a survey in the very beginning after about a year, because it was a concern to me. I never want to assume that what we're doing is right. We asked survivors, how did they feel about it? And overwhelmingly, they thought that it was great and they felt safe. So again,
you don't know unless you ask. You don't know. I unfortunately, I am out of time, but we could certainly talk about this for yet another hour. And I would like to have you both back later as we continue to follow this trial and try to figure out not only what it means for survivors, but also what it means for perpetrators, because I think that's another conversation I think that needs to be had. But thank you so very, very much, Dr. Denise McCain and Dr. Indira Hennard. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, May 19th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.